Hey everyone, how's it going? Alistair here. I've wanted to do that for so long. So good. Welcome to this week's Bedtime Stories. For those of you who are new, what I'm going to do is just run through some of the stuff which we're going to be doing. And everyone else, hi. Right, everyone, hi. Always happy to see you. Get comfortable. And here's what we're going to do. What happens every week is there is an opening monologue. And then I catch you up with some of the stuff I've been doing across the course of the week. And then we jump into the story. But before that, we always obviously have a recap for long form stuff like we're doing at the moment, and content warnings. And after the story, there's shenanigans. But we'll get to that. First off, I'm very excited because I have a camera script now. So I am going to switch to monologue cam.
Hi, Robin. Somebody said hi to background Marguerite. I appreciate that.
Hi, background Marguerite.
Hi. Hi, foreground Alistair.
Untitled, A Goose Game Creepypasta by Silvercolor. Summary. I do not remember when it first appeared in our town. Notes. See the end of the work for notes. I do not remember when it first appeared in our town. I know it hasn't always been there. The town would not have lost it, and yet it is difficult to remember a time before. Before the goose. I know how silly that sentence sounds, believe me. I've tried explaining it to friends from out of town. Hell, there's people in town who think it's an exaggeration. The ladies, who usually eat their lunch at the pub, they find it entertaining. They appear to think the creature is a fancy little lad. I envy them their ability to not see the things it does. The goose itself seems to find a vicious gratification in their admiration. I suspect it is waiting for the opportune moment to break their hopes and their happiness. No one knows where it appeared from, or where it hides when you look for it. It is impossible to find. It vanishes for days, or even weeks, but it always comes back, and seems to take a malicious pleasure in doing so, just as you begin to believe it may finally have left for good. The very moment, night or day, you allow yourself to hope it may be gone, it's there, creeping up behind you, honking loud enough to wake the dead. Some people have taken to putting up signs over their gardens and shops, stating that no geese are allowed in. This always confuses visitors to the town. People don't believe. They don't believe that any bird could understand a written sign. I, too, am confused as to why they've put up signs. Speak of the demon goose, and it shall appear to honk at you. If anything, these signs seem to be an invitation for its presence and its wrath. Of course it tries to take the signs down as soon as it sees them, but that's not all. It will take anything it can get its monstrous, sharp-toothed beak on, and I do mean anything. If you think it's too big to take, you're either wrong, like the gardener thought of his bags of fertilizer, or you're right. Nothing is safe. Nowhere is a good hiding spot. It will find whatever it is you least want it to find, and take it from you. One way or another. I hear you thinking. I hear it. Okay, so what if I'm right? If you're right and whatever you deemed unstealable has the misfortune of being too big to carry off, it will be destroyed instead. Nothing is safe. Okay, so property destruction and a bit of terror. That's all this goose does. I hear you think it. Just as I see it in the faces of everyone, I've tried to tell this, but I need to tell this story to someone. This hateful creature must not be allowed to terrorize our homes. At night, when I can't sleep, I sometimes hear it roaming, the quick pitter-patter of webbed feet outside my bedroom window matching the cadence of my heart in my throat as I wait for it to leave. Doesn't sound very brave, does it? Usually it leaves if it hears no sounds from inside. It's not brave at all. of me and of the entire village while we stay quiet at night. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you of the first and last time that horrid thing found someone who didn't stay quiet, because it has only happened once, and once was already too much. The Millers had a child called Sammy. Baby Sammy was as cute as any baby a few months old can be. That is, cute if you care about them, but otherwise a bit raisiny and bland. Sammy had been having trouble, sleeping almost from the start, and cried a lot. That isn't anything unusual in a baby. Day by day, Sammy's parents looked more tired, because when Sammy didn't sleep, they didn't sleep either. Looking back, it might count as a miracle that the goose was gone for such a long time. It terrorized the village during Mrs. Miller's pregnancy, but left shortly before she gave birth. It stayed away for many weeks after that, for what I think may have been the longest time since it first showed its vile, feathery face in our town. The day the goose came back is the day we found out baby Sammy was missing. Sammy's parents looked well rested that morning, more so than they had in weeks. That is, underneath the shock. Because Sammy was missing. Sammy had not woken them all night. From his crib, inside a closed bedroom, inside a locked house, Sammy had vanished. We searched everywhere. Of course we did. The whole village helped, and while we searched, that damned goose tore through every garden it could reach, breaking signs that had been undamaged for months, uprooting vegetables and scaring kids. As though our distraction was a joke to it, something to laugh at, to take advantage of. Late in the day, we found Sammy's pacifier near the lock in the canal. Sammy's parents were heartbroken. He's not been seen since, and no one talks about it anymore. It's best not to remind ourselves. Nor does anyone talk about the crying child you can sometimes hear at night. The crying sounds never change. It has never aged in all the time we've heard it. It cries for a short while and is silent as soon as you hear the goose. Not when the child hears it, when you hear it. I do not know what that means, and I am very sure I do not want to know. Do you know the worst thing? Sammy's mother was the first to hear those cries. She still hears them more often than anyone. Although she has given up on going out to look for Sammy. In the morning, you can tell whether she's heard the cries that night or not. She will once again look like she hasn't slept properly in months. Just like before. It's evening now, and as I write this, I hear ugly, pattering feet outside my window. I hear its vicious honks. I hear it breaking up my garden, tearing through plants and fences and anything it gets its beak on. It's trying to get in. I know it is. I think it knows what I've written. I don't know what to do. Please, if I disappear, tell my story. Tell Sammy's story. Notes. This is written as a small thank you for Escape Artists Podcasts for their wonderful streams over here on Twitch, which you should definitely check out for good times, scary stories, and shenanigans. Shenanigans! Thank you so much, Silver Coloured. That was fantastic. And really, really unsettling. I love it.
There was a content warning for that, but we covered it in the chat.
I saw that, and thank you very much. I'm terribly sorry I missed that, folks.
That's fine. We're learning.
So, how's everybody been? Hope you're all doing okay. I am changing back to a subtly different camera. I'm so excited about this. I really am. It's been an interesting week, and for the first time in a while, it actually kind of feels like interesting doesn't mean you know. A couple of things have happened, which have been small but very important for me. The Doctor Who Academia book, I feel like I've turned a corner the last couple of days, where instead of just writing random bits of Swiss cheese and just going, this is good, there is a box, it suddenly feels like it's cogent, and it actually has a structure to it, which I am so happy about. I might actually... No, I'm going to say it out loud. I think I'm going to finish the draft when I need to, and I know there's going to be some good stuff that I can fit onto it as well. The actual novel is parked for the time being for a couple of reasons, and it's not going to be parked for terribly long, and they're actually good reasons too. It concerns, in its original draft, a pair of police officers working in low Earth orbit, and it directly addresses issues of police corruption. But now is not the time.
We have a birthday in the chat.
Oh, can I see that again? It scrolled past real fast. And
Many good cows.
Many good cows. Happy birthday, Many good cows. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us. And congratulations on passing the organic chem test. Woo-woo!
Nice. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So yes, the novel's parked for a little bit because I need to work out how to unspace police it. And I've actually got some really good ideas on that. And also, I have a Doctor Who Academia book to finish. So I should crack on with that too. So work's actually doing okay. And I had an interesting experience earlier today where I had the opportunity to talk to some RPG professionals, because I'm on an RPG writer and publisher mailing list. And they did one of their 6 monthly. So, how's it going? Things. And I was resolutely un-British. And yay! And I told them, I said, well, freelancing's been non-existent, and the last 3 jobs I've had took literally years to pay, and other than that, I'm fine. How are you? And then went off into a different window, did something else, and came back to find 3 emails, one of which was someone who I respect an awful lot going, I'm really sorry to hear that. The other one of which was someone else who I respect an awful lot, and who actually got me my start in professional role-playing, going, may have some work for you. And the third one was a publisher I've never worked with before, going, if you know this system, we pay immediately. So I don't know the system, but I'm in the process of scheduling when I can teach myself that. And then I might be doing a little bit more RPG work after the Doctor Who book and the novel and the newsletter and Worldcon and the Big Finish audio drama pitch, which I'm putting together for one of their competitions, and the non-fiction pitches I talked about last week. So it's a quiet week, really, pretty much all around. Yeah, it is super exciting and terrifying in the good way. So I'm in there swinging. Yeah, obviously with the pitches and stuff, there's absolutely no guarantee I'll get anywhere with them, but it's good practice. And I actually feel like with the Doctor Who one, I actually feel like I've got something which has a coherent and emotional story, and at the same time, I may have found one of the tiny little bits of obtuse continuity no one's noticed. So I'm just running with it and hoping I can get away with it before someone else does. And I also got an email, which I wanted to read to you, because this is freaking adorable. And I actually got permission from the gentleman who wrote this to read it aloud. And there's also a chance that he and or his daughter are on the stream tonight. So if they are, hi, thank you so much.
I'm about to embarrass you.
Hi, had a wonderful geeky dad moment with my daughter yesterday because of you. My youngest, 18, about to go off to university, if they continue to have that anymore, got into podcasts about a year or so ago. I keep trying to get her to listen to EA podcasts because I know they're right down her alley. Of course, if Dad recommends, it can't be good, so she never listened. So after listening to Technicolor, I tried her again, sent her a link and said this horror podcast is about the Mask of the Red Death, which I know you loathe, but it's about a guy deconstructing it, and, well, you should listen. So yesterday, I'm out doing yard work and I hear my daughter yelling for me, trying to find me. She comes running around the side of the house with this out-of-breath, excited stream of consciousness monologue. Dad, oh my god, you know that podcast you sent me? Well, the guy who is the host or whatever is like my favourite guy. Well, I hate him because he's this really bad guy, the evil guy in my favourite podcast. Magnus Archives, that one my sister and I are always talking about. Dad aside here, they are always talking about it. But he's really good at it, and I just love him because he's like always doing these readings for fanfiction or whatever, and he's the best, but he's terrible. Well, I was grinning ear to ear. I asked her if she knew any of your backstory, and she didn't, so I filled her in about you growing up the gawky, geeky teacher's son on a small island in the middle of the North Sea. How you had a pedigree, living the life of real spooky occurrences and dealing with bullies and bad stuff, which she said made her like you even more. So there you have it. 2 fans living in the same house and not even knowing about it. Perhaps you've given me a little more not totally out of touch with the hip and with it crowd in her eyes. Thanks. Isn't that just the sweetest thing? That's just amazing.
I love that. He's the best, but he's terrible.
I
love him, but I hate him.
I think I want he's the best, but he's terrible on a mug.
I think we have the calligrapher in the chat, so let's give him a bit of time to work, shall we?
Brilliant.
Oh, fantastic.
Right, so...
We think it might be story time?
I think it might be story time.
Might be recap and content warning time.
So, recap.
Yay!
I'm feeling so professional.
Practicing, it's great. You're doing great, honey.
X-Force.
X-Force.
Previously on Search and Rescue, what we have found
Bong bong.
bong bong is a series of recollections from a search and rescue officer working in an unnamed area of the American woods. Pardon me. All of these stories involve 2 things. Basic human tragedy, just those awful things that happen sometimes, and things which are completely inhuman and random and increasingly disturbing. And what's become apparent across the 3 parts we've read to date is that all the search and rescue officers in this area have seen stairs in the woods in the middle of nowhere, just ascending. And all of them have been trained by their senior officers to not talk about them, touch them, and under no circumstances whatsoever go up them. Yeah, I'm just seeing a comment in the thread about how we're 3 parts in. Parts 1 and 2 at the very least are on the YouTube page, and I think part 3 is heading there shortly.
They both are. So the recaps, the VOD for part 3 of Search and Rescue is still on Twitch.
Yeah.
Parts 1 and 2 is now archived on YouTube. And I'll start putting these links in the chat for you.
Brilliant, thank you.
I hope. Let's see.
Okay.
If not, they will be in the show notes stream afterwards.
Fantastic,
but
thank
this
you.
Is part 4 of Search and Rescue, which is your 3rd episode.
Yes, and also it's an incredibly modular story. You can basically come in on pretty much on pretty much anything. Shadows come late. Have a good trip to the store, and we'll be here or on the Twitch page when you get back.
Don't go up any stairs.
Don't go up any stairs. Seriously, no stairs. Stairs, bad. Is bad. Is bad. Now, obviously, before we go any further, we have to do a content warning, because these things are strong coffee. And this week is death of children and infants, descriptions of gore and bodily injury, and just an overwhelming sense of menace. Also, before we dig in, please make sure you've eaten something if you haven't already. Please get some water, and please take your meds if you need to.
In Soviet Russia, stairs fall down. You do that one.
In Soviet Russia, stairs fall down you.
That's good.
Great. So I'm going to change camera. And it's time for lights off. Okay. Search and Rescue by Kerry Hammond. Part 4. Hey guys, I'm back from my training op, and I have a lot of really interesting stories to share with you. I've got enough that I'm going to break them up into 2 parts, and this is the first. I'd love to put them all in one entry, but I just haven't had a chance to write them all down yet. I didn't have anything too crazy happen while I was out there, but we did have one incident with a rookie that I found relevant. Since I'm sure you guys have been waiting for these, I'll just get right to them. I'll assign each batch of stories to the person who told them to me. First off, KD. KD is a vet who's been an SAR officer for about 15 years. She specializes in high-elevation mountain rescues and is widely considered one of the best in the field. She was one of the more enthusiastic storytellers, and since we were together a fair amount during exercises, she ended up telling me about 4 that really stuck with me. The first she told me was in response to a question about her most traumatic calls. She shook her head and told me really bad calls happen more frequently on the mountain because the potential for nasty accidents is higher. About 5 years ago, one of the parks she worked at had a string of disappearances. It was a bad year, she said, one of the worst on record as far as weather went. They were getting about a foot of new snow every couple of days, and there were a few avalanches that killed some climbers. They'd warned people about staying on the mapped areas, but of course, there are some folks who just don't listen. Now, in one particularly nasty case, an entire family got wiped out because the father decided he knew better than the officials and he took them into an area that wasn't safe. They were snowshoeing, and as best as KD could figure, they'd walked out onto a shelf of snow that looked solid but actually wasn't. It gave way, this family went ass over tea kettle, almost 300 feet down a slope. They landed on the rocks at the bottom, and the parents died instantly. One of the kids did as well. The other two survived. One had a broken leg and fractured ribs. The other was almost unharmed, save for some bruising and a sprained ankle. The uninjured child left his sibling behind and set out to find help. KD said the kid didn't make it more than half a mile before a storm overtook him. The kid stopped, tried to get warm, maybe just to rest, and ended up freezing to death. They ended up finding the family with the help of some witnesses who saw them heading out into the wilderness. And she was the one to find the kid who'd frozen to death, looking for help. She said it had started to snow, just enough to obscure long-distance vision, but not enough to make searching impossible. She saw a figure sitting in the snow up ahead, and she got to it as quickly as possible. She described in detail how, as she got closer, she realized it was a child, that they were deceased, and they had frozen in one of the most pitiful positions she'd ever found a corpse in. The kid was sitting upright, with his knees tucked up against his chest. His arms were curled around them, and his head was tucked up in his coat. When she moved the coat to look at his face, she saw that he had died crying. His face was twisted, and the tears were frozen on his cheeks. She said it was painfully obvious that the kid was terrified when he succumbed to hypothermia, and as a mother, it broke her heart. She told me repeatedly that she hopes the father is burning in hell as we speak. The other traumatic story she told me that stood out in my mind was one that happened when she was a rookie. Her team got a report of an experienced climber who hadn't come home the previous day. His wife was convinced that something bad had happened because he'd never failed to come home on time. So they went out looking for him, and they had to climb what sounded like some very technically challenging parts of the mountain. They got to a relatively flat area, and KD started seeing blood in the snow. She followed the trail, and as she went, she started seeing tissue as well. Now, she wasn't exactly sure what body part it had come from, but the further she followed it, the more there was. So she follows this blood and tissue trail to a sheltered area under a cliff face, and she finds the climber. She said there was so much blood, more than she'd ever seen before. He was lying face down, one arm stretched out in front of him, as if he died crawling. She looked closer, and when she did, she saw that he'd been partially disemboweled, which is where the tissue she'd seen had come from. Now, the guy had an ice pick tucked into a hip holster, and this thing was covered in blood. Of course, they'll never be sure exactly what happened, but as best as she can figure, this is what went down. The guy had been attempting to climb up to the next area, and had been using his ice axe to ascend. He'd probably hit a loose patch, and had fallen. On the way down, or possibly when he'd landed, he'd been impaled on the axe, and it had disemboweled him. He had drug himself along, tearing pieces of himself out as he went, and had died under the cliff face. Now, she isn't terribly bothered by gore, But I guess a few of the guys who came to help her remove the body threw up when they turned him over, and a good portion of his intestines spilled out. Now, I mentioned to her that I was interested in hearing about any experiences she had with people just completely disappearing. When I did that, her eyes lit up. She leaned in close. She said, "Want to hear a real doozy?" So she tells me about how, when she first started, there was a case that got a lot of attention in the media. A family had been out berry picking in an area of the forest really close to the entrance of the park. They had 2 little boys, both under the age of 5, and at some point during the day, one of them vanished. Now, there is an absolutely massive search, and they find nothing. It's another of those cases where it's like the kid was never even there to begin with. The dogs just sit down. They don't pick up anything. No trace of the kid is found for 2 months. And finally, the search is called off. Fast forward 6 months. The family come back to place flowers at a memorial that's been set up there for the kid. They bring their other son. While they're placing the flowers, they lose sight of the kid for about 3 seconds, and in that span of time, he vanishes into thin air. Now, obviously, the parents are beyond devastated. It's awful enough to lose 1 child, but to lose 2? That's beyond imagining. The search is huge, one of the largest in state history. About 300 volunteers, and they comb every inch of this park looking for the kid. But again, there's no trace of him. Search goes on for about a week, with people looking miles from the part of the park he vanished from. And then, almost 2 weeks later, a volunteer 15 miles from the designated search area radios in. He's found the kid. Now, they assume the kid was dead. He's not. The volunteer says he's not only alive, he's in good shape. Katie and her team book it out there to recover the kid, and when they get there, she can't believe this is the kid that's been missing. His clothes are clean, there's no dirt on him anywhere, he doesn't appear traumatized. The volunteer says he found the kid sitting on a log, playing with a little twig bundle that's bound together with some old rope. Katie asks where he's been, who he was with for these 2 weeks, and the kid tells her that he's been with the Fuzzy Man. Now, Katie believes firmly in Bigfoot, so she gets all excited and asks what he means by fuzzy. Was he hairy? But the kid says no. He wasn't hairy, he was a fuzzy man. And he describes a man that's blurry, like when you close your eyes but not all the way closed. He says the man came out of the trees and took the kid with him, deep into the woods. The kid says he slept in a hollow tree and the fuzzy man gave him berries to eat. Katie asks if the man was mean, if he scared the kid. The kid says, "Nah, he wasn't scary, but I didn't like how he didn't have eyes." Katie says they get the kid back to headquarters and a cop takes him into town to talk to him more about what happened. She's friends with the cop that talked to him, and she said the kid described being kept in this tree by the fuzzy man and given berries whenever he was hungry. He was allowed to wander around a very specific clearing, but when he tried to go further, the fuzzy man would get mad and yell real loud, even though he didn't have a mouth. When the kid got scared at night, the fuzzy man made it go brighter and gave him the twig bundle. He said the fuzzy man was going to keep him, but he had to let him go because the kid wasn't the right kind. He either couldn't or wouldn't elaborate more on that. So the cops are just sort of left scratching their heads, and the search for his brother is renewed with no results. The kid has no idea where his brother might be, and they never find him. The last story Katie told me was of something that happened to her. She got separated from her training group when she was a rookie. They were learning the basics of high elevation belaying on a well-mapped side of the mountain, and she had to use the bathroom. So she goes off like 50 yards from the group during a meal break, does her business, and I will tell the rest exactly as she told it to me. So I go to take a piss, and once I'm done, I start going back to the group. But I've only gotten about 5 feet when I realise I have no idea where I am. And this wasn't an, oh, I got turned around, lost. I mean, I literally had no fucking clue where I was. If you'd asked me, I don't think I'd have been able to tell you what state we were in. It was sort of how I imagine people with amnesia feel, you know? You're completely lost and you have no idea what to do. So I just stood there for a while, just trying to figure out where the fuck I was and what I was supposed to do. But the longer I stand there, the more confused and turned around I get. So I started walking. As I recall, just picked a random direction and went for it. And as I'm walking, it's just getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I have no concept of why I'm on the mountain in the first place. I'm just trudging through the snow, and then I start hearing this voice. It's kind of in my head, almost like if a frog could talk, all low and a little croaky, and it's telling me over and over, it's okay. It's okay. You just need to find something to eat. Find something to eat, and you'll be okay. Just keep walking and find something to eat. 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 So I start looking around for anything that I can eat. And I swear to God, I have never felt that hungry in my whole life. It was bottomless. I think I'd have eaten just about anything you put in front of me right then. I had no concept of time. So I had no idea how long I'd been out when I hear an actual voice coming towards me. And I go towards it. And I see one of the other SARs. And he looks fucking terrified. He's running towards me, asking if I'm okay and what the hell I'm doing out here. And the scary thing was, as he's running towards me, I kind of see myself reaching into my belt for my hunting knife. I'm not even really thinking about what I'm doing, but what I am thinking is that I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'll never be okay again. So I just have to eat. He sees me doing that and he backs off right away. He yells at me to put my knife away, that he's not going to hurt me, and that kind of snaps me back. All of a sudden, I know exactly where I am, and I put the knife away. I run to him. I ask how long I've been gone, thinking he's going to tell me maybe half an hour or so, and then he looks at me and says, I've been gone for 2 fucking days. I've gone over 2 peaks and ended up almost on the other side of the mountain, and if I had kept going, I would have ended up wandering into about 300 miles of wilderness. They'd never have found me. He can't believe I'm not dead. And of course, I don't know what the fuck to think. To me, no time has passed at all. I don't say anything. I just go back with him to a rendezvous point. And I'm taken back to HQ to be airlifted to the hospital. When I get there, they do all kinds of tests. Try to figure out what happened. Best they can guess, I had some kind of weird fugue state, which is kind of like amnesia or a weird seizure that knocked my brain out of whack. But the truth is, we don't know. It's never happened again, but I'll tell you, ever since then, I never go out there alone. People rag on me, say, take the piss for making them come with me when I have to leave the group. But I just tell them, listening to me take a piss in the snow is better than losing me for 2 fucking days on a freezing mountain. The next person I talked to was EW, who now works as an EMT. Used to be a trainer. He still comes to ops like this to help out, but he doesn't work full time for us anymore. EW specialised in finding lost kids. He seemed to just have a sixth sense when it came to knowing where they'd gone. He's a legend among the more senior vets, but he gets embarrassed if you compliment him on his work. He sat down for dinner with me one evening. We ended up swapping stories. Most of them were just casual, but when we got on the subject of our weirder calls, I mentioned that I had a buddy who'd gone up a set of stairs. He got really quiet, and he asked me if I'd heard of a little boy who'd disappeared from his park a few years back. I hadn't. So he told me this story. They were out looking for this 11-year-old boy, Joey, who'd gone missing near a river. Of course, first thought was that he'd fallen in and drowned, but when they brought dogs out, they led SAR officers away from the river and up into this really densely forested area. When we do searches for people, we search in a grid, and we search every box of the grid incredibly thoroughly. Here's what EW's team noticed. There was a really strange pattern that the dogs were starting to define. Dogs in alternating boxes were picking up Joey's scent, but they were losing it when they overlapped with another box. If you think of a checkerboard, Joey's scent was being picked up in random black squares, but never in red. Now, this, of course, didn't make any sense, because how could the kid bounce from area to area without leaving a scent in each place he passed? EW and his partner pass into a new box of the grid, and EW notices a set of stairs about 50 yards away. He tells his partner that they need to go check near it, but his partner flat out refuses. He tells EW that he's made it a point never to go near any stairs he sees, and that while it may be routine, he's not going to pretend that it's normal. He tells EW, finally, he'll wait in sight while EW checks. Now, EW says he was pretty irritated, but he felt for the guy, didn't push him. I walked over to the stairs. They were small, kind of like stairs into a basement. I didn't feel really strongly one way or the other about them. The stairs, I mean, so I wasn't scared or anything. I guess I'm like everyone else, I just prefer not to think about them too much. Anyway, I went over and could see there was something lying on the bottom step, sort of curled up. My heart sinks, because of course you always hope for the best, and we were confident that we'd find this kid alive. He'd only been missing a few hours. But I knew right away that it was him, and I knew right away that he was dead. He was curled up in a little ball on the step, holding his stomach. It looked like he'd been in horrible pain when he died, but I didn't see any blood except some on his lips and chin. I radioed in that I'd found him, and we got his body back to command. That poor family, they were devastated. The parents couldn't understand how he'd be dead, because he'd only been gone for such a short amount of time. And on top of that, we didn't have any obvious cause of death, and that just made it so much worse. I figured he'd probably eaten something poisonous, since he was holding his stomach when I found him, but I didn't want to guess. It's hard enough to hear that your kid's dead without some stupid SAR guy guessing about how it happened. And they took him away. I went home, and I tried very hard not to think about it. I hate finding dead kids, man. I loved this job, but it's one of the reasons I left. I've got 2 daughters, and the thought of losing them that way, he choked up a little here. I'm not great with emotional stuff like that, and it's always sort of awkward to see a grown man cry, so I didn't really know what to do. He pulled himself together eventually, though, and he kept going. We don't always hear back from the coroners about cause of death. It's not really our job to know, I guess, and sometimes if they think it's foul play, they won't tell us because of legal bullshit. But I've got a friend who works for the sheriff's department, and he'll usually pass along any interesting info if I ask. In this case, though, I actually got a call from him about a week later. He asks if I remember the kid, and of course I do. And he says some seriously weird shit's going on. He tells me, EW, man, you're going to think I'm crazy, but the coroner has no idea what happened to this kid. He's never seen anything like it. My friend goes on to tell me that when the coroner opened the kid up, even he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The kid's organs were like Swiss cheese. Quarter-sized holes were punched clean through just about every single organ this kid had, aside from his heart and his lungs. But his colon, his stomach, his kidneys, even one of his testicles were full of these clean holes. My friend said the coroner described it as if someone had taken a hole punch and punched holes out of everything. It was so neat. But the kid didn't have a scratch on him. No entry wounds, no exit wounds. The closest anyone there had ever seen like it was a guy who'd filled himself full of buckshot a year or so back while cleaning his rifle. No one had a clue what could possibly have caused it. My friend asked if I'd ever heard of anything like it, or if we'd had similar cases in the past, but I've never even heard of something like that, and I told him I wasn't going to be of any help to him. As far as I know, the coroner determined the cause of death as something like massive internal bleeding, but no one knows what really happened. I have never been able to forget that kid. I have nightmares about that sometimes. I don't let my kids go into the woods alone. When we go together, I never let them out of my sight. I used to love it out here, but that case and a couple of others just ruined it for me. At that point, dinner was over, so we started to clean up and go back to our cabins. Before we went our separate ways, he put his hand on my shoulder and he looked at me real close. He tells me there are bad things out there, things that don't care if we have families or lives or that we can think and feel. He tells me to be careful and he walks away. I didn't have a chance to talk with him again, but that story stuck with me. By pure coincidence, I got to talk to another vet, PB. PB's been in the SAR field for years. We were partnered on a grid sweep during a training exercise, and we're chatting away casually about how we liked the job, what kind of things we'd seen, the like, you know. And at one point, we passed an old set of stairs, although these were probably from an old fire lookout, given the area that we were in. I kind of casually mentioned that I was curious about the stairs, and I wished I knew more about them. He got kind of quiet, and looked like he wanted to tell me something, but wasn't sure if he should. Finally, he told me to turn my radio off. Now obviously this is something we are never, ever supposed to do. But I did it, and he did the same. About 7 years ago, he tells me, he was out on a call with a rookie. They were in an area of the park that's had a lot of strange reports and events. Disappearances, stories about lights in the forest, odd noises, things like that. The rookie, totally spooked, kept going on and on about things in the woods. According to PB, guy wouldn't stop talking about the goat man. Just on and on, goat man this, goat man that. Finally, I told him there was plenty else to be afraid of out here that was very, very real, and that he'd better go over this thing with the goat man. The rookie wanted to know what kind of things I was talking about, and I just told him to shut up and walk. We crested a little ridge, and there was a staircase 10 yards ahead. And the rook stops dead in his tracks, and he just stands there looking at him. I tell him, see, that's something you should be afraid of. The rookie asks me what the hell those things are doing at it, and for some reason, I just open up. I tell him the truth, or what I've been told is the truth at any rate. I could have gotten a lot of trouble for doing what I did, and I could get in a lot of trouble for repeating it to you. But you're a nice kid, and I want you to stop looking into this. Quit while you're ahead. So I'll tell you what I know, under the condition that you never breathe a word of this to the soups. Now, I told him I wouldn't say a word, and he double checks that our radios are off. And then he starts talking. When I first started out, we were a little less tight-lipped about them, and other things that happen out here. We warned people before they were even hired that there was weird shit going on. I guess the Forest Service was tired of having such a massive turnover rate, and they wanted people to know what they were getting into. So they started having people sign these agreements that they wouldn't go to the media about what they were going to see. FS didn't want to scare people away, so the last thing they needed was spooked rookies running off to the media with stories of ghosts and haunted stairs. But eventually, They found out the agreements weren't necessary. People not only didn't want to talk about what they saw, they wouldn't. A few times, media tried to talk to people when kids or hikers would disappear. No one would say a word. I can't explain it. I guess we just don't really want to admit anything is wrong. This is our job, to be out in the woods every single day. We don't need to be spooked, and the best way to avoid that is to pretend like everything's okay. So, I will tell you everything I can think of, and after that, I'm done talking about it. For good. And I expect you to not bring it up around me. Ever. The stairs have been out here as long as the parks have existed. We have records going back decades describing them. Sometimes people go up them, nothing happens. Other times, look, I really don't like talking about this, but sometimes really bad shit happens. I saw one guy get his hand sliced clean off when he got to the top step. Reached out to touch a tree branch, and it happened so fast. 1 second his hand was there, next gone. Completely clean wound. We couldn't find it. The guy almost died. Another time, a woman touched one of the stairs, blood vessel in her brain exploded. Literally exploded. Like a water balloon. She sort of stumbled down, came over to me. All she got out was, I think something is wrong with me. And she dropped like a sack of flour. Dead before she hit the ground. I will never forget the way the blood leaked into the inside of her eye. I watched it turn red before she died. I watched it happen. There wasn't a single thing I could do to help. We warn people. We warn them not to go anywhere near them, but there's always at least one idiot who does. And even if nothing happens to them, something bad always happens. Kids go missing as we're on their trail. Someone dies the next day. Cut in half in a completely safe part of the park. I don't know why, but something bad always happens. I don't know exactly why they're out here, but it doesn't matter. They're here, and if we are smart, we'll tell our new officers exactly what they are capable of. We were both quiet for a little while. I was afraid to talk because I wasn't sure if he was done. He looked like he wanted to say something else. Finally, he spoke up again. You ever noticed how you can't find the same ones twice? I nodded, expecting him to continue. But he just stayed quiet, walking along beside me, and eventually he started a story about the biggest deer he'd ever seen in the park. I didn't bring up the subject again, and I didn't press him for any more stories. He dropped out of the op the next day. Apparently he left before the sun came up, said he was sick. None of us have heard from him since he left. I'm going to stop here for the time being. I'll try and post the next part in the coming days, but what with it being the end of summer, things are pretty busy here. Regardless, thanks for the continued interest, guys. You've really awakened this curiosity in me. I didn't even know I had it. I'll see you next time. And that is part 4 of Search and Rescue. How's everyone doing? We have a query. Goose versus Stairs. Who'd win? Clearly Goose. It's Goose all the way.
I don't know. There was a lot of love for Goat Man.
They team up. They just team up and lure people onto the stairs for stuff. For, you could almost say,
stuff.
Shenanigans. So, a brief explanation. Stair stuff, wink wonk. Shenanigans is the part of the evening's festivities where Captain Lucas makes his presence known. It's normally Magnus Archives related stuff. For those of you who haven't come in via the Magnus Archives, Peter Lucas is the character that I've played on the show, and he is the show's unsung hero. Don't Google that. Don't ask anybody to explain it to you. Just listen. It's fine. I'm the good guy. Moving on. So, what we do is Marguerite
is going to drink your tea because you're not for some reason.
Is going to drink my tea because I haven't for some reason. Shenanigans.
I need to get the sock puppet so I can do goose shenanigans.
I am the hero of the show. Please do not ask me any more questions.
I will not be taking questions at this time. I am the hero. Goodbye.
Masuvis, your dad is the one. Hi, my dad is the one who wrote the email from earlier, and I want to clarify Peter Lucas is a jerk, but I think you're very lovely, Mr. Alistair. Masuvis, thank you so much for joining us. You and your dad honestly have made my week with that email. I'm so glad that you like this. That you like all the various stuff that I do,
and that we didn't embarrass you,
and that we didn't horribly embarrass you. Thank you so much for being here. That's awesome. So yes, shenanigans, where we pull various things from the fandom community for Peter, and we do them to camera, and sometimes manage to not laugh.
That's not going to
happen. Chances are not. What's first? We have I Only Have Eyes for You from imthecat.tumblr.com. The links will be in the Twitter thread. And need a moment.
This is my fault.
Peter, I only have eyes for you. Elias, sorry. You're not really my type. Peter, but Elias, oh, it's nothing personal. I just like to inhabit smaller bodies. That's all. Peter, inhabit. Peter, is that Peter? Is that Victorian slang for top? Moving on.
I was tickled by that. Thank you.
Archivist Poems has given us several requests. One of which is this tweet, which is Elias is a dear man and Peter is a love man. Send tweet.
But you have to do it right. You have to do it like Matt Ryan says love.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Like that.
All right. Elias is a dear man and Peter is a love man. Send tweet.
There we go.
All right, love.
Exactly, right? They were talking about terms of endearment.
Yes. And this is also from Archivist Poems, isn't it? Because a discussion came up, which is whether or not Peter had ever referred to anybody as lad. And because the Magnus Archives fandom are just detectives, it very quickly became clear that he hadn't. And we wanted to do something about that.
Zalia says, I now need John Constantine to meet Peter and Elias and the Archivist.
AO3, you have your marching orders.
Yes, and we're going to have to stop there to keep this very, very safe for work, because I think Victorian top we could get away with, but...
Yeah, because it's just a jumper that you wear in the Victorian era. I'll keep reading. Well, you see, lad, the most important thing you need to know about being a first mate is... What? Oh, yes, I called you lad. Well, it possibly came from Middle English, lad, a plural of lead, meaning one who is led. Though it also may come from the Old Norse, lad, meaning woolen stocking. It's quite funny how many old words for socks were synonymous for fool. Anyway, today it often refers to a rowdy young man, and more recently men who share recreational or working interests. Personally, I like to use it as a, oh, you don't like it when I call you lad? Perhaps this first mate thing won't work out after all. Lad.
Linguistics nerd.
Linguistics nerd.
Constantine TMA crossover. Yeah. There's about the same number of hellish bargains and bad life choices. Yeah. Yeah,
I could absolutely see that. I would be just fine with that. Just picturing Martin sinking into his chair as Peter lectures him about the etymology of lad. Well, it's quite interesting. I have some slides. More of an overhead projector.
Really? Yeah. Really? Peter can use an overhead projector but can't use his phone.
Well, I mean, an overhead projector is just a light source and a lens.
But he always gets the slides upside down.
Yes, it's
right?
like, oh, I have no idea how this... Oh, good grief, you know. Martin throws himself into the lonely to escape.
The most menace I've ever heard in Gentleman's Labor. Yeah, banish the lads. That's a good one.
Peter can project things using a torture and blanket. You know, Mr. Lucas, why are you doing a presentation with shadow puppets? Because art, my boy.
Sometimes you gotta just murder the lads.
Could you say Elias is... Yes, of course. Elias is a lovely lad. If it wasn't for him being incredibly evil. Peter is so good at shadow puppets. You headcanon. Yeah, he's just worryingly good. You know, the cool one with the bat and the caca. All of that, he's fantastic at.
Fictional characters.
Fictional characters.
There we go. Exactly.
So I think that's our show.
That's the shenanigans that we have for you, lovely folks, this week.
Thank you so much for joining us, folks, especially coming from so many disparate places as you have. It's always lovely to see Magnus Archives folks here. It's lovely to see Pseudopod folks here as well. People who we know from Twitter, you're all always welcome. And we will do our best to terrify and entertain you between 10 and 11 or so and on Wednesday nights. So, next week we'll be back with part 5 of Search and Rescue. And between there and now, please, if you can, join us on Sunday morning about 10-ish.
No, Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, British Standard Time.
After sleeps.
After sleeps have happened. For just, we do a really kind of low-key, relaxed 2-hour stream there, which is kind of coffee and breakfast and chatting, while the video game happens in the background. And the video game at the moment is Concrete Genie, which is this beautiful game about a kid who uses the genies which have been conjured via very odd means from their sketchbook to light their town back up. It's really beautiful, and it's
very relaxing.
And very relaxing and a ton of fun to play. So that's Sunday, and we'll be back here next week for the next part of Search and Rescue. Big thanks to all of you. Massive thanks to Marguerite for everything. And massive thanks to Ryan for the amazing music which you heard on the waiting screen. We'll see you next time.